Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back. If you're not familiar with this channel, my name is Zach. I'm a brand strategist, photographer, and videographer. And today I'm going to be showing you how to get your subjects to stand out in the photos you're taking, whether that be shooting models or shooting products. For the purpose of this video, we're going to be diving into Adobe Lightroom CC, but everything I teach you is also applicable to Lightroom Classic. We're going to accomplish everything using the brush tool. It's not complicated, and it's something that you would have wished you would have thought of a long time ago if you haven't already thought of it. Essentially, we're going in with the primary objective of separating our subject from the background. And I'm going to dive in and show you exactly how to do that. So, if you take a look at my screen, we have a model here. This is a shoot for one of my clients, Black Rifle Coffee, and this is not edited at all. And so we're just going to dive right in, and I'm going to show you how to separate the subject from the background. So the very first thing that I always do when I'm beginning an edit on an image is I immediately do something called burning. And burning is essentially selecting certain parts of the image and reducing the exposure, like kind of like putting a piece of bread in the toaster. You're toasting it. So basically, we're going to draw a line using the brush around the entire subject, and then we're going to reduce the exposure of that line, thereby making it darker, which is why it's called burning. And what that's going to do is it's going to separate it from the background because there's going to be kind of an outline around the entire subject. And it's going to be so subtle that most people, unless they're looking for it, aren't even going to know it's there. And it's the separating factor that makes some subjects pop and others not. So let's go ahead and dive in and get that part done. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my masking tools and I'm going to select brush, and then I'm going to zoom in on this image. Well, I need to select my brush. There we go. And I'm going to zoom in rather close, and I'm going to start on the bottom of the image, and I always use number 1 sizing, but you can adjust that based on how much you're zoomed into the image. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure actually that auto mask is on. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the entire subject, and I'm just going to start selecting everything. Some people prefer to do this in Photoshop. I don't prefer to do it that way. I prefer to do it as the very first step to editing my image. So I'm going to go ahead and go around this entire image, and I will check back with you in just a second. Okay, cool. So we've neared the end of the selection process of just going around the entire subject and drawing a brush along the entire outline. So if I scroll through here, you can see that anywhere that there's an edge of the subject, I've drawn an outline. The only thing that I excluded was this area right here, but I may just go ahead and do that. When I first glanced at it, it didn't look like a smooth line, but I'll go ahead and get it done just for the purpose of this tutorial. But as you can see, we've selected the entire edge of the subject. So all we need to do now is it's as simple as going to your light tab here and then reducing the exposure by anywhere between negative 0.10 and negative 0.20. Depending on how much light I have behind the subject, will adjust the amount that I reduce the exposure. If there's a dark background behind the subject, I'll typically reduce the exposure by negative 0.20, but if it's light back there, I'll typically go like negative 0.16 or negative 0.10, because you can start to notice that the edges are burned and it looks unnatural if you do it with the wrong mix. But now that we've done that part, now we can kind of subtly see that if we look really close, there's a dark line around the entire subject, and we did that by just reducing the exposure of the brush that we drew. So I'm just going to take that back to like negative 16, just like that. And then I'm going to zoom out, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just into this area right here, and I'm going to do before and after. So before, just like that, after, before, after. And now I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'll do a before, after. And it's so subtle that you don't even know you're seeing it. And anyone who looks at professional photographs of models or of products, they just look at those and they're enamored because the products just seem to stand out. Well, that is why, because the photographer took the time and meticulous effort to burn all of the edges on the subject to separate it from the background. But we're actually going to go a step further, and we are going to perform some more masking in order to further separate the subject from the background. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the entire subject. You can do this with Adobe's new masking tools. You can select the entire person just like this, or in instances where it doesn't select it properly, you can just use the object selection to draw around your entire object. But it looks like it was going to select the person correctly. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to select the entire person, and then I'm going to just click create, and then that will create a mask for me. I just want to make sure that it didn't select this area. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm going to remove some of this to see if anything gets removed. I just don't want there to be any overlap in here, because then that will slightly modify how professional the overall image looks. So I'm just going to remove all of the green that's inside of that subject. Do the same thing down here, make sure there's nothing. Okay, so we're good. So we've correctly selected our subject, and now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to that mask, and I'm going to click these three little dots here, and then I'm going to duplicate and invert the mask. So that's going to copy it, and then it's going to invert it so that we've only selected the background of the image. Now I am going to go through and just make sure that the invert looks okay. So you can see right here we have a little bit of overlap for light. So I'm just going to use my brush tool here. Oh, I accidentally added a gradient. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to use my brush tool, and I'm just going to fill in this light, just like that. And sometimes I'll go around the entire image just to make sure, like up here, we've got some light leaks. So I'm just going to go through there. And right now I'm just using the shift key, and I have auto mask on, so it knows which parts of the photo to hit with the brush and which parts to leave alone. So I'm just going to go around like this. And the reason we're doing this is because when we start to modify the background of the image, if there's any light coming through, it's going to look kind of weird. So we want to make sure that we get rid of all of these little light leaks that are coming through. And you may already be complaining that this is very meticulous, but that's why professional photographers get paid the big bucks, because they take the time to do all of the small things right, and that's why their photos look so amazing. But okay, so got a little bit here. You just want to get rid of all of these light leaks here. Okay, that looks about right, so we're good to go there. So now that we've drawn or selected a mask of the entire background of the image, now we can do the same thing that we did when we burned the edges of the previous subject. We can reduce the exposure of the highlighted areas. And you can reduce highlights if you want, or you can just reduce exposure if you want. So I got this down to -52. Now, keep in mind, there's no other edits outside of burning the edges of this model and also reducing the exposure of the background. And so if we do a before and after, you're going to see such a drastic change. It's going to look like someone edited this for, 30 minutes or so. But the reality is we just made two subtle changes. So this is before, and this is after. Before, after. And you see that the subject is completely separated from her background in such a subtle way that made her pop. It is really enamoring to an audience who's looking at an image like this, and they think like, whoa, what kind of camera did you use? How did you shoot that? But the reality is you just made 2 subtle and meticulous changes. But we can also go a step further. Depending on the area that you're shooting in, this isn't always valid in every light condition, but you can adjust the subject and also increase the exposure on the subject or increase the shadows. I find I have better luck with just shadows, but I'll increase the shadows on the subject just like that, maybe even the highlights. You don't always have to do that. It just depends on a subject by subject image. I'll just do the exposure for now, just slightly increase that. So now I have burned the edges of the subject, which is this model here. I have reduced the exposure of the background to make it darker, thereby further separating the subject. And then I've also increased the exposure of the subject itself to further separate her from the background. And so now if we go before and after again, before, after, it looks like a completely different image that was shot on some really expensive lens. But again, we just made some meticulous and subtle changes. But yeah, that is all there is to it. And from there, you can apply any other brushes that you apply, any other edits or presets that you usually apply. This few steps of subtle changes will go a long way of changing how professional your product or model images look. And that's all there is to it. If this solved your problem or this helped you, if you learned something, please let me know in the comments below. Please drop a like on this video if you found it valuable, and also subscribe if you found this video valuable. Send it to a friend who also might need this information. And if there's anything that you have questions about as far as brand strategy, photography, videography, design, please feel free to drop those questions in the comments, and I'd be happy to either answer your question in the comments or even create a video like this answering your question. But yeah, that's all she wrote. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will catch you guys in the next one.